the River Trading Post Pod Network. Here we'll bring you interesting tips, tidbits, information, discussions, and music, and just about everything else of interest to collectors of fine Native American art. The River Trading Post Pod Network is brought to you by River Trading Post. Be sure to drop in and visit with us in Santa Fe, Scottsdale, or Chicagoland. And of course, you can visit with us anytime at rivertradingpost.com. Sarah Penman is a Scot who lives in the United States. Her interest in the Native American community began back in 1988 when she was invited to Greengrass, South Dakota, home of Chief Arvil Lookinghorse, the spiritual leader of the Lakota-Dakota Nakota Nation and keeper of the sacred calf pipe. As a result of this meeting, Sarah learned of the Chief Bigfoot Memorial Ride, a 250-mile spiritual journey on horseback undertaken by the Lakota to commemorate the Wounded Knee Massacre of 1890. The ride was held for 5 consecutive years in December, and Sarah joined the ride from 1988 to 1990. During the ride, Sarah began to take photographs, and upon her return to write articles for The Circle, Minnesota's largest Native American newspaper. As she began listening to the stories that the elders told, she was inspired to begin gathering their life histories. And in 1991, Sarah received a grant from the Minnesota Historical Society in support of this work, which led her to begin producing video and radio documentaries. One of Sarah's documentaries is entitled Honor the Grandmothers. In this 2-part series, you will hear the voices of Dakota Lakota women elders talking about their lives as wives and mothers, harvesters, dreamers, workers, healers, and teachers in a time of struggle and survival. Elders are the keepers of the memory of the people. They remember the teachings of their ancestors, and they pass them on to coming generations. In this program, River Trading Post presents Part 1 of Honor the Grandmothers.
This is Honor the Grandmothers. I'm Juanita Espinosa of the Dakota-Ojibwe Nations. I grew up on a reservation in the Dakotas. In the community where I lived, there were many elders. I was brought up to respect, honor, help, and treat them as my own grandparents, even though we were not necessarily related by blood. Traditionally, the grandparents often assisted with raising and teaching the grandchildren. Today, that is not as common, and people don't always realize the wealth of wisdom that lies behind the door where their grandmother lives.
Boy, here's the girls I'm expecting. Hey. Oh, yeah, I'm happy. I'm glad to see you.
The grandmothers live on the prairie lands of Minnesota and near the Black Hills in the heart of the Lakota-Dakota Nations. They live along bumpy dirt roads, in small communities, and in housing projects on the edge of cities. And when asked, they will open their hearts and pour out the knowledge of their own lives and those who went before. Of course, there are a few things they won't talk about.
But one thing I can tell you is how old I am. No. Yeah, this is silly, not help him. Beard, not help him. And I was born December 25th, 1928. Now turning to 63 years old, and I was born in Grass Creek near Manderson, South Dakota. And right now I lived in Ogallala housing.
My name is Iola Columbus. I was born in Pipestone, Minnesota, but was raised in South Dakota on a small reservation by my grandmother.
I'm Cecilia Hernandez Montgomery, and I was born on a Pine Ridge Reservation back in November 2nd, 1910. And my hometown is Kyle, South Dakota.
My name is Rosalind. I was baptized by that name, Rosalind.
And my other name used to be Laura New Holy. When I went to school, I acquired the name of Alice. But I don't know how that deal goes. Then I was born here in Grass Creek, and I'm still living here in Grass Creek. And I think I'm the oldest one around here now, besides the hills.
My name is Stella, pretty sounding flute. And I'm a full-blood leaf shooter and Hunkpati Dakota. My Indian name was given to me by my grandparents. It's a sacred name. Nobody else has this name, and nobody could ever take it away from me. My Indian name is Tahishpa Washdewiya. That means pretty quill woman.
I do have an Indian name. It's Hekotawi and means greyhorn woman. And there is a story about it. One of my grandmothers, I believe there was 6 or 7 sisters. One of them had this name.
Before I was a year old, they gave me this Indian name. They put me in a buffalo robe and they put this eagle plume on my head. And my ancestor grandmothers told me a lot of things, but I was just a baby, a month old.
The name is given to you for a purpose. You are to be like that person. Even today, I think about that. Well, am I doing right? Do I live up to that? That name kind of molds you to what you are.
So before I die, I will fulfill whatever they requested when they prayed to God, when they pinned this eagle plume on my head.
In our language, there's a word, tioshpa. It means who you grow up with, who you know, who you have eye contact with when you wake up in the morning. Tioshpa means the band, the extended family circle. In that circle, the grandparents are the keepers of the memory of the people. They pass it along by doing what is important at the moment, whether it's the gathering of roots, the birth of a child, or the ceremony we all attend. That is how we affirm who we are over the generations. We don't need to have everything documented because our blood runs strong with the collective histories of our nations.
Oh, takojo una terio takatakuku kero chichakikte. She used to say, come, I'll go tell you these things, So then you could tell your takojas, your grandchildren.
I came from a real traditional background. I was raised in a traditional way, and by that I mean when I was about, I would say around 3 or 4 years old, my grandparents wanted to raise me. And the reason for that was to pass on their knowledge of our culture, the traditions and things to one of the grandchildren.
We live in a teepee. When I was a little girl, Grandma told us that when you go out, she knows when you go out. And when you come back in, she knows when you come in. And then in the mornings, make sure everyone's coming in, and then she fix the door, go to sleep. Early in the morning, Grandma get up and she make hot up soup, hot up food. She said, we all get up in a circle. We see each other, we know each other. When we know when someone's sick, or we're really close, the families.
Our value system, our philosophy, the things that my grandmother, like, when I was raised by her, she'd talk about, having respect for other people, having respect for property, Respect everything. These are God's creations. Of course, you always say, Wakantanka, God's creations. Respect other people. Respect yourself.
My grandmothers were really sincere. They always was humble, like to share. They never asked, "You want a cup of coffee?" They didn't say that. They go up and they take a cup and they put coffee in there and they look in their cupboards to see if there's a piece of bread. Honana, yuta, that means, here, eat this, be strong. That's the way my grandmothers were.
The things that my grandmother talked to me about respecting and honoring people has really helped, whether it's young, old people, or little children, especially little children. I was taught by my grandmother that they were gifts from God and that we needed to raise them and hold them, revere them, and that they were holy, even though they're babies, talk to them. They can't answer you, but you're being heard.
They would pray, they would look up to thank God for the stars and the moon, and especially Mother Earth. They always prayed to Mother Earth, and thank God for the water, the medicine, and the food that grows.
The grandmothers knew how to use the gifts of the land to maintain life and good health in their families. Today, those traditions come into conflict with industrial culture. Access to the land is often restricted, yet grandmothers continue to grow gardens and gather traditional food and medicine because they say if you don't use it, it goes away. These are ways of passing on their knowledge as it was passed on to them.
From the time of spring, soon as first there was a tea that we picked, and then we dug turnips, and then we dug roots as they came into season for medicinal purposes. And then there was a time when we dried corn and we dried meat. All of these things were by season,
I used to have a grandma on my dad's side that was in the Wounded Knee. We called her lame grandma. Her leg was shattered and it was never set. She was a medicine woman. Well, this is what I was coming to. She was a very, what would you call, real Indian. Her Indian beliefs were strong. Her medicine was good. She believed in all the herbs and roots, leaves, and she used to come see my mother every now and then. She used to give her, they call them pejuta o pachte. That means medicine bag. But she was a good medicine woman. Everybody knew her. So they used to always rely on lame grandma. She lived to be, in her 90s, and she died. I call her the little apostle on crutches.
My grandmother said her aunt, she's a medicine woman, and late at night when there's a medicine she has to dig, she said she go out way out where nobody is. She goes out there and grandma said she sings and she prays and then sings, and she called this medicine's name by the name, and she said she could keep it, she could see it. She said it just like a glow in the dark. But she said only one plant. She took it, bring it back and leave it, hang it outside, not to take it inside. But she said she's only one could do that. But she died. Grandma don't want to do it. I asked her. Try to make her do it, show me. And she said, no. She said, that's her power. That's hers. She's gone. She took it with her.
My grandmother used to say when we'd go dig medicines, if there's two of them, take one, leave the other one, so it could seed. And also she used to tell me that there was a certain kind of medicine we used to dig, and she said, You know, she said this one woman got real greedy. She dug everything she seen in sight, and she was digging and digging that one time. And she said when she got to the end of this root, there was a snake. So she says, granddaughter, you don't want to get to that where you're going to be, greedy. Always think and be sure to give thanks, Take your tobacco or whatever, and always give thanks to the Creator. God gave us the fresh water, fresh running water, and He gave us medicines, and He gave us sweet grass, and He gave us food and fruit. He didn't let us down. He took care of us. Now that the dams and chemicals, it's all gone. You almost have to find a secret place to find fruit, or else you have to pay somebody to get you some. Here, we're such a small community. There isn't much land. And where there's meadows and pasture lands, well, we can't get at it because there's no trespassing signs. You can't just go and take a walk in a field or a meadow and pick flowers or look for roots and stuff. That's impossible these days,
Back in those days, nobody ate fancy or nobody go hungry because we ate from the same pot. Everyone, every family. And if one's don't have that much food, then we share, he said. So live in a circle is a good life.
My kids are hungry. My grandchildren are hungry. They've got to eat. That's the way our ancestors prayed. Just one. We only want one deer today. We want a couple of buffaloes today. There's young couples are going to get married. They need a shina, a robe. And there's going to be babies being born. We've got to have some rabbit skins.
Everything came from the garden, eggs and everything came from the chickens. When we ate chickens, and me and my brothers and my sisters used to milk cows early in the morning. Many's a time I got kicked over by one of the cows, my milk bucket and all. But we were brought up the hard way, but we never did go hungry because we were raised on a food what my parents, they were good providers.
A lot of times I went to bed hungry on a reservation. Sometimes Mama would say, you kids, be quiet now. Daddy went to go hunt. But I know that she was praying, because pretty soon he'll be dark and she'll have that lamp. And pretty soon I could hear him. And he brought something back, Then there'd be butchering. And no matter how late it was, she'd cook. She'd wake us up, and then we'd eat. Just meat, just fried meat.
Grandpa always say, which food is good for your body? I'm anxious to answer, but my cousin said, vegetable and milk. He said, the teacher told us to drink a lot of milk and eat a lot of vegetable. He looked at us and he said, let me tell you something. We're going to try this tonight. He said, let's put out a vegetable and a piece of meat outside. It was in winter. And we'll see which one we could use again. Next morning, I'm anxious to see which one we could use again. I was thinking, the vegetables are all frozen. Kaka, I think the meat. You're right, he said. You freeze the meat, you can use it again. But look, vegetable, that's how your body's going to be. He said, you're going to freeze easy. And by drinking a lot of milk, you get lazy. And you drink a lot of milk, when somebody talks to you, you sit there lowered and look like a cow God. Well, what shall we tell the teacher when we go back to school? What food is good for you?
In traditional education, children learn from storytelling and observation. But beginning in the mid-1800s, the U.S. government began a policy of removing Native children from their families on a massive scale. Boarding schools run by the government or by religious orders set out to, quote, civilize the savages and to destroy the fabric of Native culture. Many generations were shaped by this experience of having their entire culture denied.
Oh, Christopher Columbus, he just came and he was a saint. He was a holy man, you know. He come and he educated. He taught your grandparents how to talk the right way. And then he brought a cross, Christopher Columbus. And then from there, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal. Christopher Columbus, he wasn't thinking about that cross. He wasn't thinking about God. Oh, when he saw this country, he must have hollered bingo.
The first time I went to government school, I didn't know I was going. And I didn't realize it till I got there, because the only thing I can remember is that we were boarded on a school bus and we traveled for about 2-3 days before we reached our destination, which was the Pipestone Indian School. And the only logical reason I can think of is that, I wasn't being treated right at the other schools, because my first year of school, the white kids used to stone us after we got out of school,
I went to school at Steuben, South Dakota. It was a Catholic mission. I knew how to read and write and do sewing and to work mostly. And we sure done a lot of praying. But we weren't supposed to pray in our own language. They didn't teach us that only the white man's language. We're supposed to know that. We're supposed to forget and not be like our ancestors, the red savages. We were taught that.
Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah.
We had to wear woolen dresses, even during the summer. And that was terrible. Long-sleeve woolen dresses, worn to town or to church. And it was dark red or dark green. So everybody knew where we were from, no matter where they seen us. They're from that Indian school.
I went to school at Holy Rosary. I think the whole family did. It was strictly Catholic, boy. But you know how it is when you're in a Catholic school. Like we used to have picnics in the spring of the year, and that's when all the kids would get together, and they had a big, beautiful picnic ground out in the trees. And whenever we go out to the picnic grounds, boy, we had brothers stationed and nuns stationed all over, really keeping a close watch on us. We couldn't even, sit close together if we visited, or if we hold hands. But we used to sneak and hold hands. I tell you, you bring you up in a Catholic school, you just have to toe the mark.
They thought we was lousy. make us take all our clothes off and put some kind of an ointment on our heads, you know. And then they even gave us some ointment to put on our faces. It had burnt our eyes. Oh, I said, somebody help us, you know, we're screaming. Painful to our eyes. And in those days, if our ancestors knew what child abuse was, they would have got it first degree.
They took us to school in September, and we never got out of there till about June 1st. So we stayed there year-round. And if our folks wanted to visit us, they'd come. They used to camp in them days. See, this was back in the 20s. Oh, my mother would cook up a big storm for us. You know, we'd get hungry for home-cooked food. She'd make us wojapi and fry bread and bring papasaka and cook everything, you know, that we liked that we didn't get at the school. So we used to be tickled when they'd come and camp.
I was so lonesome and homesick. And I told my grandmother, I said, they're mean. And to this day, I wonder how she ever communicated. Maybe she found somebody to interpret for her because she couldn't speak English. And yet she came back. She went somewhere and came back, and she says, I'm going to take you home. So I must have had a tough little grandma.
My parents paid $15 or $20 a year for music lessons. So I tell you, I got music in my brain till the day I die. I'll never forget the notes, because every time you made a little mistake on the piano, this teacher would be sitting there and she had a long ruler and boy, she'd whack her hands. I said, I sure learned music the hard way. I got it knocked into me. But I never did forget it. That's why I play by note, but I can't play by ear.
Going to Holy Rosary is just like an army camp. You have to do this right on time and on the double, and you're not supposed to talk Indian, which is hard. If we talk Indian, they punish us. They slap us in the mouth or hit us in the mouth with a ruler.
And then they got me to talk like they would. And to me, when I talk to them, they sound like a bunch of bees. You know? And pretty soon I got so I could, talk like they do, think like they do, which turned my whole world, kind of upside down. I was used to being a white person than being an Indian.
But sometimes when the old lady come and wants us to interpret for her, that's the time it's really good to interpret for her. Big chance, fat chance to talk Indian, your own language. I'm so happy to see her. I always run over there to her, and I want to. Grandma, what do you want? What do you want me to tell you? You want me to interpret for you? I wanted to. In Indian, I said, "Uche, tak yachi he. Yechi just kakte." She said, "Huh?" I said, "Yes. I want to came to buy bread and piece of roast." She said, "So it does. Looks like I'm tricky. Grandma told me not to talk Indian, but I want to talk Indian." So
America the Beautiful. See, some of my keys don't sound them kids.
It's hard. There's a lot of change between when your grandparents talk Indian to you all the time and in the Indian ways. It's more comfortable to me, but when I go to the white man's world, I have to be careful with a lot of things.
Let's forget it. The keys are terrible on there. Bad.
This has been part 1 of Honor the Grandmothers, a documentary honoring the stories of Dakota-Lakota women elders. In part 2, we will follow the grandmothers as they leave the boarding schools and struggle to build careers, raise families, and maintain traditional values while the world rapidly changes around them. Honor the Grandmothers was produced by Kitchen Table Productions at the studios of KFAI Radio and Film in the Cities in Minneapolis and St. Paul. The producers were Monica Borlein and Sarah Penman. Ken Bramstead was the engineer. The music was by Paula Horn and Kevin Locke. The drum song was created by the Hautani singers of Sioux Valley, Manitoba, and performed by Karen Artichoker, Catherine Grayday, Donna Haukus, and Patty Wells of Vermilion, South Dakota. I'm Juanita Espinosa. Thanks for listening. Honor the Grandmothers was made possible in part with funding from the Minnesota Humanities Commission in cooperation with the National Endowment for the Humanities and the Minnesota State Legislature, the Paul Robeson Fund for Independent Media, the Minnesota Historical Society, the Headwaters Fund, and a KFAI Film in the City Studio Access Grant. Thanks also to our fiscal agents, Compass in St. Paul, and the Prairie Island Dakota community. The views expressed do not necessarily represent the funders or this broadcast station. For a cassette copy of this program, write Kitchen Table Productions, P.O. Box 14322, Minneapolis, Minnesota 55414.
Thank you for joining us for Part 1 of Honor the Grandmothers, and don't forget to listen to Part 2 of this wonderful program. Also, be sure to enjoy our other podcasts, especially made for you, collectors of fine Native American art. This is your host, Joe Zeller, saying goodbye for now. You have been listening to a presentation of the River Trading Post Pod Network. Join us again for tips, tidbits, information, discussions, and music, and just about everything else of interest to collectors of Native American art. The River Trading Post Pod Network is brought to you by River Trading Post. If you ever get the chance, drop in and visit with us in Santa Fe, Scottsdale, or Chicagoland. And of course, you can visit us anytime at rivertradingpost.com.